Our friends at FAMM have hosted one of our searchlights every year for the last 3 years. They have been such effective advocates for really level-headed policies in Pennsylvania and in fact throughout the nation. And this is our annual time when we our annual searchlight, when we simply turn over the entire evening to our friends at FAMM. So I want to thank everyone at FAMM, and especially my personal friend Celeste, for running tonight's searchlight. I'm going to turn off my camera. I'll be back in about half an hour with questions from social media. Whatever platform you're watching us on tonight, please submit some questions. I'll be tracking those behind the scenes. I'll be back in about half an hour or 45 minutes, and I'll forward some questions from Celeste. With that, Celeste is going to introduce the guests here from FAMM. Celeste, welcome.
Thank you so much, Sean. And thank you to Eastern State Penitentiary for hosting this conversation as a part of their incredible Searchlight series of events. Good evening, everyone. As Sean said, my name is Celeste Trusty, and I am Pennsylvania State Policy Director for FAMM. Here with me tonight are Lieutenant Governor and Chairman of the Pennsylvania Board of Pardons, John Fetterman, Criminal Justice Reform Advocate, Mr. Charles Brown, and Reverend Dr. Kimberlee Johnson, who directs the Prison Education Program at Eastern University. Thank you all so much for lending your experience and your expertise to this important discussion about expanding second chances in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania's approach to sentencing is not only wasteful, but it separates families, it exacerbates racial disparities, and it deprives people who have made mistakes of nearly any opportunity for redemption or mercy. FAMM recently launched a Second Chances agenda to help create and expand mechanisms for sentence review. In Pennsylvania, our Second Chances agenda includes ending life without parole, passing medical and elderly release legislation and expanding compassionate release, and expanding the use of clemency. All of us change and mature, and our laws and our concept of justice should reflect that. If you'd like to learn more about FAMM's Second Chances agenda in Pennsylvania, please text CHANCES to 21333 or visit us at famm.org. So I want to start off tonight's discussion by asking each panelist why expanding second chances is so important to you. And I want to begin with, by far, our most expert panelist on this issue, Mr. Charles Brown. Charles, can you let us know why expanding second chances in Pennsylvania is so important to you?
Well, thank you, Celeste, for, first of all, for allowing me to be a part of this panel. I accepted your offer to speak, not just for myself, but for the men and women who are behind bars, you know, and I know so many of them are deserving of an opportunity to prove that they can be law-abiding citizens as they are doing inside there. I am a product of that second chance. I was once serving a life without the possibility of parole sentence, and I served 36 plus years. It was hard and it was easy to give up. But I always believed that it was a higher purpose for me in life. And I just never believed that my fate was to be stuck behind bars because I had so much to give to the world, I believe. And I'm doing that right now because of this second chance that was given to me. I remember like how I just would grasp onto my faith. You know, I'm a Christian, and I'm a strong believer in God. And I just found other ways to keep me from falling into that stigma of prison and just giving up, because your hope, that ray of hope does kind of dimmer at times. And, you know, and I'm quite sure it is for a lot of other men and women inside there who have served decades behind bars. But some kind of resolve just be inside you that you just keep pushing forward because you don't want that to be the end of your story. We made bad decisions that, you know, may have taken someone's lives or whatever the situation may be. But we don't feel as though that defines who we are. We know that we are better people than that. And just like myself, I was supposed to die inside a prison. But given that second chance, I'm out here and I'm doing wonderful things. I'm living a law-abiding citizen life, productive. I'm giving back. And I just know that there are so many men and women inside there could do even more greater things than I'm trying to do. Because a lot of them men have instilled a lot of morals, principles, and values in me that allow me to stay on the right course. So I'm a strong proponent of the second chance.
Thank you so much, Charles, for being here and for telling us a little bit more about your personal story. I want to move on to Lieutenant Governor Fetterman. Can you let us know a little bit more about why expanding second chances in Pennsylvania is important to you?
Sure, absolutely. I think first and foremost, the purpose of prison is to make sure that if those individuals are a danger to public safety, if those individuals found shift away from there, that they in many cases they don't belong in prison. And you have an individual that has served 30, 40 or more years, and we as a society need to ask ourselves, how much is enough? When does punishment become redemption? When does rehabilitation cease to exist, a possibility? And this idea that we are not the sum total of one mistake, we are not the sum total of one fateful bad decision, or whether or not there was any underlying intent to take a life. Particularly second degree, it just doesn't make any sense in Pennsylvania. If you didn't actively seek to take a life, you shouldn't have yours taken. And you think about what second degree is in Pennsylvania, you will serve the same sentence as the Tree of Life shooter who went in and shot 11 people to death. You'll both end up dying in prison, and that doesn't make any sense. This idea that people are beyond redemption, I don't believe that in so many different cases. And if we could reduce our prison population, we could return these individuals back to their families, back to their communities, and everyone is safer or better off, and the outcomes are more just. Why wouldn't we want to do that?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And Dr. Johnson, I'd love to hear your perspective on the importance of second chances here in Pennsylvania.
Good evening, everyone. So I come at this from a number of different perspectives. So I come to it, of course, as an African-American woman who grew up in an urban area and have seen a lot of community members end up in prison. I come to this as a person who's had incarcerated family members. I come to this as a person who's a victim of crime. I come to this as a Christian and as a clergy leader and as an educator. But the first thing I would say is that I don't believe there are any throwaway people. And so for a system to give someone a life without parole sentence, for example, I think is excessive punishment. And I think it violates the 8th Amendment ban on excessive, cruel and unusual and excessive punishment. So that's the first part. The second thing I would say, I was listening to the Lieutenant Governor speak about the purpose of prison. I just recognize that there's a problem with the system itself. So I don't believe there are any throwaway people, but I also recognize that the system disproportionately impacts people of color, discriminates against people for that reason. It's unfair to the poor, to people who can't afford good legal representation. I recognize that there are laws that are unjust, that have given people excessive sentences. And so for that reason, I think we need to have a more redemptive approach. And I believe that people are capable of change, people are capable of growth, people are capable of learning. And they should be given second chances. I believe people make mistakes, and I believe people are in prison unjustly. So for all of those reasons, I think we need to be advocating for second chances for incarcerated people.
Thank you so much. And so I kind of want to just expand on this idea about the people who we have in prison and why we need to kind of shine a light on them and show why we need to expand second chances. So Charles, I want to talk to you a little bit more. You kind of mentioned earlier about the mentors who helped you whenever you entered prison, but then also the people who were given a second chance and the things that they're able to do in their home communities. Can you talk to us a little bit more about the people that you met while you were inside, but also the people that you might have mentored while you were inside, and then also the people who are out now and the things that they're doing to help others?
Yes. There are so many older gentlemen who really got it already. They understood, the need for changing. Whereas though I came in as a pretty much a teenager and still trying to understand how to navigate through this barbaric environment, they pulled me to the side after a couple of hiccups, that I had, dealt with. But they showed me that you don't have to go that route. Get your education, watch who you be around, take advantage of, even though it was hard for a person serving a life sentence to get trades and things of that nature. But they said, well, when opportunity opened up, jump on it. And there's individuals who right now, like one of the gentlemen that come to mind is Joyner. This gentleman has over 50 years in prison, and people look at him like as a throwaway, but this guy really, really took me under his wing, and just at times, like I say, I was ready to kind of fly off the handle, but he was like, no, you have a bigger purpose. Don't do it. Don't let this guy that's coming in here, with a 2 to 4 and just acting crazy, just throw all the stuff that make you throw all the stuff that you built up away. Then there's guys like Walter Smith, Larry Walker. These are guys, Kevin Royster. I mean, these are some family members. They were in prison, but they was like, look, I made these bad decisions and I'm still trying to get it, but you have a different purpose. You already getting it. So I latched on to that and just continued my education. Never, even though times was getting hard when your appeals get denied, but I held on to my faith and then those encouraging words from these men and just kept pushing forward to look forward to this day that I'm out here. I was also a mentor in there, and I mentored, like I seen the Horton brothers, Dennis and Lee, when they first came through. These are some fine gentlemen. And I saw something.
Remarkable gentlemen.
Yes, and I saw something in them, and I was like, why are they in here? They didn't even seem like the street type of people to me. And we became real close, and I watched them just mature and elevate themselves inside a negative environment, and they've done so many wonderful things. And they talked to me, and we studied law together. We did so many wonderful things together. And when it was time for me to leave Chester prison, I wish I could have just put them in my suitcase and took them out with me, and when to see them being denied commutation, those things was like, nah, that can't be. I had to relook at, the stuff that was written. I was like, it's impossible, because I knew it was a shoo-in that they would be released. Then you have gentlemen and women who were juvenile lifers who are out now, and society and the criminal justice system think that because we were confined for these lengthy periods of time, that it will be so difficult for us to adapt and navigate out in society. But everyone out here is doing amazing jobs. They're holding down the fort. They're showing that what happened 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago didn't define who we were. We are better people. We belong out here. There's so many people who make mistakes on a daily basis that have committed murder and still come out. But these gentlemen and women have went through the trenches, done made impeccable advances inside of prison. A lot of the prisons rely on men and women who are serving life without possibility of parole sentences to stabilize the prisons. And they do that. And so if they can hold down a fort in there and do all those wonderful things in there and then show themselves worthy, then why can't they be out here and do the same, which can at least try to curb some of this violence that's going on out here? Because some people out here want to help, but they don't know how. But people who have been through that type of lifestyle, the street life and all those other things, they can add more to the conversation with these young people out here. It can really, really change some lives, because I know that I already have touched several, and some that I don't even know. And the fight still goes on, and I'm gonna continue doing what I have to do to be the voice for those in there till they get out here, and then to a voice for the ones out here to stop them from going in there.
Thank you. And Charles, you mentioned I'm sorry, go ahead, Dr.
If I could just piggyback off of that, because I'm just really appreciating what Charles is sharing. I think you are really speaking to this false notion that all of the lawbreaker bad people are behind bars, are behind those cement walls, and all the law-abiding good people are on this side, right? Outside of those bars and outside of those walls. And that really is not true. And I just appreciate what you're saying about those who were serving juvenile life without parole sentences, who are on the outside now, aren't just doing well, but are doing well despite trauma, despite stigma, despite different areas of opportunity, really are overcoming more to do well, right? And so I just appreciate what you're saying, and I'm just so glad that you are in that number and that you are also giving back. And the other thing that I'm seeing too, especially in advocacy work, is that formerly incarcerated people are really the leaders, at least here in Philadelphia, have really emerged as the leaders in that movement work. And so I just, hats off to all of you.
Thank you.
And that's right. And I want to go back to, Charles, you mentioned Dennis and Lee Horton, who,
yes.
We at FAMM, we shared their story as well. And I want to go to Lieutenant Governor Fetterman. As a member of the Pennsylvania Board of Pardons, you interact with people who are applying for clemency, who are serving these life and long sentences. And you've even hired 2 people who were granted clemency, Naomi and George. And I'd love to hear you elaborate on your experience interacting with these people.
Sure. I find a lot of the most common touchstone that I use to describe to people that have never experienced it is like, well, have you seen The Shawshank Redemption? And almost everybody has. And I'm like, well, most of these people are like Morgan Freeman's character. And it's like, if you think Morgan Freeman's character should have died in prison at the end of the movie, then I got nothing for you. If you think that this is how life should end for all of these people, because most of these individuals are thoughtful, they've expressed true, genuine remorse. They bear no resemblance to the individuals they were 30, 40 or more years ago than when they committed that terrible crime. The Horton brothers got mentioned. The Horton brothers were called the 2 finest inmates in our entire state prison system, the 2, and I have made getting them out of prison like the most, critical thing I'll ever do. And there isn't anything that I won't do within the limits of the law in my office to make sure that they are free, because not only do I fundamentally believe that they're innocent, but I fundamentally believe, what message do we send to the inmates and to society as a whole, where 2 individuals are going to die in prison when the individual, the recognized shooter, was released 12 years ago? And it's a tragedy. And I can't think of any, it's awful that the Horton brothers sit in prison. And I won't stop until they get a chance to rejoin their family and rejoin society. And it's remarkable when you are talking about thousands of people to be identified as the top 2 best out of all of them. You think Harvard's elite? You think Yale is elite? The top 2. And the warden of the prison came in person to testify. And they said, I would love to live next to these guys. I want to take them out to dinner when they get out. These are the kind of people that make up these populations. And I want to do everything I can to make sure they get a chance. George Trudell was not a throwaway person. Naomi Blunt was 38 years in prison. A judge forensically exonerated her in 1985. And yet she stayed in prison all those years and could have easily died in prison. And we're like, no, this is not right. So like the criminal justice system in these cases is so horrible, random, and arbitrary and awful. And finding out who is in our prisons doing life without parole, should they be there? Can a second chance, is that the right thing? And we can't ever give into this idea that these people are beyond redemption.
Yes, and I agree. I mean, and as I mentioned earlier, so many of these people are just trapped in the system that severely lacks opportunities for second chances here in Pennsylvania. And one of the things that I think we don't really pay attention enough to in society is the impact that this has on families and communities. So in 1980, we had 848 people serving life sentences here in Pennsylvania. And now we have more than 5,300 people serving life without parole in Pennsylvania. That's outrageous. And that's not just going to impact the actual person serving that sentence. There's an impact on families and the communities as well. And I want to hear from you, Charles. You know, what was the impact of serving a life without parole sentence on your family? And what did you see the impact on other people and their families? And then also, what has the benefit been of your second chance on your family?
Well, first, I would like to say that, yes, my family was impacted. But I think that first and foremost, the person whose life was lost, his family suffered tremendously. And as I shared during my resentencing, you know, if I could have changed anything that night, I would have, you know, and there's not a day that went by that it wasn't a period where I didn't think of that incident, that individual, what his family's going through and what had lost. Then I started worrying about, after that, then I trickled down to the impact that it had on my family. You know, I just think of how when I was first arrested and I was already only 16, but I was scared. And my mom came, and I'm thinking about like, oh, they call her my mom, and you know, and I'm just a wreck. And I'm like, I'm thinking that she's gonna come in screaming and, you know, just going off on me. What do you do? This, and that. And the first thing she did was, when she came in that room, was grab me, hug me, cried, and just told me that she was gonna be there for me. And she didn't waver for over those 36 plus years. And it was so hard because during that time, you know, you kind of feel like you let your family down. You know, they have to travel all these hours and hours to see you, going through all this crazy treatment, you know, by staff, and, you know, trying to get resources that they at times didn't have just to get there, to see your face, to let you know this is gonna be all right, and they are there. So I know my family was impacted tremendously. You know, I was just one of the fortunate ones. I lost a brother during that time, you know, few people, but I saw over the years, people, pretty much their whole family was wiped out from doing these decades inside of prison. And these were still some of the ones who mentored me, you know, when it was easy for them to just say, you know what, the hell with everything. You know, bad enough the system telling me that I'm gonna die in here, so why do I have to go and try to get these degrees and, you know, further my education and help these other young ones that's going back into society? I'm stuck in here. I can do whatever I want. But they still keep it, you know, just holding on to that ray of hope. You know, and then there's the one that still had their families in their corners, like the Horton brothers and the Joyners and the Smiths that I was speaking about. Their family is pulling for them, and they want desperately to get back to their families, you know, and to just live a normal life. You know, that's why second chances is so important, because we are letting a lot of beautiful people, you know, just waste away inside there. And I would feel that it would have been a disservice for me to be given a second chance and get out here and then just enjoy life when I left so much of a part of me is still there. So I'm gonna speak up, and anytime I'm able to lend my voice for them, I'm gonna do that, because they deserve a second chance. It's some, like Lieutenant Fetterman said, there's some beautiful, amazing men and women inside there. And they just, and right now, if they could hear this, they would just thank you and all the other ones who put this together to have things heard. So I really appreciate it.
Well, we appreciate you for being here and for all the advocacy work that you do, Charles. I want to move to Dr. Johnson. I want to talk to you about the broader implications of denying second chances to people who are serving these long and life without parole sentences. 65% of people serving life without parole sentences in Pennsylvania are Black. And so, you know, I wonder if you could kind of touch on the disproportionate harm caused to Black communities and Black families by limiting these second chances.
Well, I think you just stated it with that statistic. So people of color are disproportionately affected. So our percentage of representation in the system is not comparable to the percentage of our representation in the population. And it does impact families. When a man or a woman is absent from their family, there's a loss of income. There's a loss of leadership in that household. It's a loss to the community in which that person resides. There are losses all the way around. And there's loss of relationship. And once that person is incarcerated, I've had family members who are incarcerated. Just trying to maintain a relationship with someone behind bars is difficult. It's expensive. If they've been shipped far away from your home, which is not uncommon, it's difficult to even arrange visitation to see your loved ones. Phone calls are an absolute ripoff as well for the person who's incarcerated and for their family members. So the system really does crush families in a sense. It crushes communities in a sense, because it doesn't only separate, but it separates and it makes future contact very difficult for those families. And can I just throw in another thing too? And I hope this is not too far off topic, but I just also think a lot about the children who have incarcerated parents and what that means for them. And I think about the wages that men and women are making inside of prisons, which I just call them slave wages. And I think about the fact that if those same people were working on the outside, we would be legally required to pay them a minimum wage. And I often wonder if we didn't use people in prison for labor, if they would not be able to at least contribute to their families back home, wouldn't they be able to save money for housing when they came out, right? Those kinds of things. You know, and talking to the guys at Chester, which is where Eastern University is currently serving, they're deeply concerned about the family members that they left behind and their well-being. And so as a Black woman especially, I'm concerned about Black families, but I'm concerned about all families who are experiencing this kind of separation.
Thank you so much. I want to talk a little bit about our older prison population here in Pennsylvania. So our prison population, our older prison population has grown from 6% of our overall prison population to 22% since 1996. And now we have more than 10,000 people over the age of 50 living in our state prisons here in Pennsylvania. And so our Department of Corrections spends $3.2 million a month on prescriptions for people over age 50 in their care. And, you know, we're currently experiencing a pretty serious budget crisis because of COVID right now. And I kind of want to move over to Lieutenant Governor and talk about expanding clemency and second chances as a possible response to our current budget shortfall.
Yeah, first and foremost, and we're actively trying to audit our population to identify those inmates that are most deserving and does it make sense. I was on a panel with Secretary Wetzel earlier before the pandemic hit, and he said something remarkable that I agree with. He said, we could reduce our prison population by 1/3 and not make anyone less safe in Pennsylvania. And that's a profound statement. Think about that. Our corrections budget is around $3.2 billion. You reduce it by 1/3, you're talking what? Conservatively, $900 million a year that could be spent on our schools and our roads, on our broadband network, you name it. And we're spending it warehousing people. Statistically, we know we age out of crime. We age out of crime. And the recidivism rate for juvenile lifers is what? Less than 1%? I mean, it's astronomically small, you know? And we have a natural experiment that was created by that landmark decision. And it's like, what's the recidivism rate? And it's minuscule. And yet we continue to warehouse people until they literally die. And that doesn't make any sense. And it's needless and it's cruel. And there's also so much arbitrary carnage with respects to sentencing guidelines. And like the Horton brothers, for example, how can you have somebody who did not take the life, didn't even intend to take a life, die in prison, yet the actual trigger man was released 12 years ago because they had a better lawyer or they got a deal or you name it. This idea that you roll the dice and you reject a 5-year plea and you roll the dice and you get convicted, then you somehow are deserving to die in prison is absurd. You know, FAMM speaks about that, the trial penalty and how absurd it is. And if I'm John Q. taxpayer, you know, I want public safety, and I think it's appropriate that we honor our victims and realize the trauma that they've endured and their losses. But I don't want our state to be in the vengeance department, in the perpetual punishment department. I don't want our state and our tax money to go to warehousing people until they die. We as a society have the moral obligation to ask, how much is enough? How much is enough? And I think back to the person I was, you know, when I was 18 years old, and I wouldn't, you know, this idea that I'm 51 years old, that I could be dying in prison for a dumb mistake I made, you know, all those years ago, and that I'm beyond redemption. If I've lived my best life in prison and I have, you know, like the Evans brothers, I mean, they're going to be getting out. And they've done almost 40 years in prison, and they were offered a deal of 10 years. And you know what the tragedy is that the victims' relatives said that our family can't heal unless these men get out. This is ridiculous. You know, it's tragic. And Pennsylvania was warehousing the Evans brothers until their death, and we fought to get them out. And it's like there are a lot of Evans brothers, and we need to understand that these are not Hannibal Lecters. These are George Trudells. These are Naomi Blunts. These are the Evans brothers. These are the Horton brothers. These are all individuals that are deserving of a second chance.
Absolutely. And I mean, if we go back to Charles Brown right now, you know, you're one of those people. You essentially grew up in prison, you know, and I'd love to hear kind of your experience about aging and maturing in prison, but also what you experienced with other people aging and maturing while they're in prison. As Lieutenant Governor said, we age out of crime. We're all different people than we were when we were 18, 19, even 25. So I'd love to hear you expand a little bit on that since you had that experience.
Well, like I said, I went in at 16 and never been in prison before, never been in a juvenile facility. So it was difficult trying to understand, how do I survive inside here? It's the ones, they say only the strong survive at times. And during the era that I came in, that's what it was like. I was considered like, just like a lot of the other juvenile lifers that went through there, someone was considered like goldfish thrown into a tank with killer sharks and piranhas and stuff. And so you had to either get preyed upon, eaten, or you had to grow fangs at times. So when I say that analogy, at the beginning, you had your rough patch. You look and see what had to be done. And some people tell you, like, look, you're going to have to deal with that situation because that guy going to come at you. So you did what you had to do to make sure that you were protected. But that only lasted like for a small amount of time. And then, people left you alone. It was about, okay, he's a stand-up guy. And, then they start seeing you doing things that, okay, he's about sports. He's about going to school and getting his education and, just rising above it. He's about trying to learn the law to fight his case because he want to go home. He's willing to help somebody and, talk a person out of, fighting on the basketball court and things of that nature. So you start doing it's to start out little steps. The next thing you be like, start feeling good. Like, oh, I stopped him from going to the RHU and, and he thanking you. And so you're like, wow, and so then you get to the point where, like, I didn't understand what a life sentence was. My attorney didn't explain it to me. He told me I would be eligible for parole with good behavior after 8.5+ years. So when I was offered a deal of 10 to 20 years, I was like, why would I take that when I can fight it and try to win the case, or I'll get this life sentence and I'll just be cool for 8.5 years and be eligible for parole. But that wasn't true. So that was frustrating. And, you want to give up, but you know that I can't do it. And I know that I'm going to get out of here one day. And it was always, from day one, I always believed that I was going to one day be back on the streets. So it clicked in my head, if that's what I'm really believing in, my family telling me how much they need me out here, and if I keep going down the wrong path and just burying myself, they said I'm going to die in it. So why do I have to dig my own grave? If I'm saying I don't want to be in there, I don't want to die in it. So I got it and started saying, you know what? As long as nobody physically put me in danger and try to hurt me, I wasn't going to get into none of that. So I'm going to protect myself by any means necessary. But once nobody bothered me, I just knew that I had to change my thinking and just become a better person, the person that I knew that I was really born to be. And so I just worked on it. And, I still have my flaws, but it's not a flaw that wears though that I'm a threat to society. My flaws is overlooked, and people, when they found out, I run into people all the time and they found out that I was incarcerated for as long as I was, they was like, what? I would have never thought that of you because you don't carry yourself like a person in prison. I said, well, thank you. But, and it's like I say, so many people who get accredited for my growth and development, and I will always, besides first and foremost giving all the glory to God, I will always say how these men stepped up and helped me stay on the right track. So you do outgrow that stuff. You see that you want to come home and all these years going by, you losing loved ones and you want to be with loved ones. You be like, this is nonsense. We used to sit back and just watch people do stuff like, why are they doing it? Like, remember you used to do that? And then we're like, yeah, but, and eventually, hopefully we can help them grow out of it, so that's it for me.
Thank you. And so before we actually move on to audience Q&A, I want to just ask Lieutenant Governor Fetterman a little bit to expand upon what you have done as the chair of Board of Pardons to expand clemency and access to clemency in Pennsylvania.
Sure. Well, what I've done is I've aligned perfectly with the governor Governor Wolf firmly believes in a second chance, and he and I have sat down and we've made that a priority. Is that he wants as many lives on his desk as he possibly can to evaluate. And we have taken aggressive steps in aligning the values of our board. And what some people don't understand is that due to the McFadden tragedy in the 90s, probably the single most devastating thing that has led to this enormous high population of our prison lifers, the 5-0 threshold is damning. And, I fully support it returning back to 3-2 simple majority. That would be a profound shift. But the reality is that would have to change the Constitution. And working with the board to get to the point where it's like, let's get it on the governor's desk and let's decide. And things have been contentious. I'm not going to lie. It's no secret. But at the end of the day, there's examples like other members on this panel that it's like we age out of crime. Is society better off having him die in prison? Is society better off having George Trudell or Naomi Blunt die in prison? And demonstrating the power of that example and getting it out. And that's why I'm so delighted to be on panels like this, because I think there's a misconception that, if you're a killer, well, you must be like Hannibal Lecter, where they have to wheel you around with a face mask. It's like, no, these people are just like Morgan Freeman in Shawshank, And it's like, well, why do they have to die in prison? They don't. We freed an inmate who spent 51 years, and he was just a getaway. He was a getaway driver in a failed bank robbery. He spent 51 years in prison. He applied 14 times for clemency, and we got him out. And I can't even imagine. He says he carries 2 pieces of paper around: his execution order to be electrocuted, and his clemency. And I can't imagine, excuse me, what that must have been like. And again, the fundamental question we as a society need to answer is, how much is enough? And I don't believe in perpetual punishment for the overwhelming majority of these cases. If you are a 19-year-old, you grew up in a tough situation, you grew up in this kind of environment, that one decision on a rainy night that things got out of hand, like, we shouldn't have to check in with you 45 years later and say, well, how's it going? Because, we need to have a path for redemption for many, many, many of these individuals, because the examples are the justification for that. And your organization and every other organization that promotes that, that's what I'm all about, is demonstrating the value, the intrinsic value, and the moral duty to grant a second chance to people.
Absolutely. Thank you. So I'm going to turn it over to Sean, who's going to read out some questions from the audience.
Celeste, can I just say one thing? Can I get 20 seconds? I just want to, I just think that it would be fitting. It's something that I had wrote a poem. It's very short when I was incarcerated. And I think that it speaks to what we're talking about. And it's titled My Soul. Soul screams out, hoping to escape the demoralizing, inhumane conditions that it faces every single day. My soul, my soul, my soul. My soul screams out to be taken from under the lock and key that encamps in the midst of steel bars and concrete walls. My soul, my soul, my soul. My soul screams out in a thunderous voice to one day be set free. My soul, my soul, my soul. Thank you.
Wow, Charles, thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Charles, you broke up a little bit. If you email us that poem, we'll put it on the Eastern State Facebook page so people can read it. I think we might have missed the first stanza of that. And rather than going back, we'd love to be able to read the whole thing. I think we'd like to just read it anyway. I have some questions here. They're coming in from Facebook and from Zoom. So this is a hard question, but I thought we should go ahead and tackle it. This is from Rachel, coming in from the Eastern State Facebook page. My question is for the Lieutenant Governor, although I bet our audience would love to hear from all of you on this. In watching the most recent Board of Pardons public hearings, I was heartbroken to see the duress of many victims' family members while testifying. At the same time, it was clear that decades of incarceration had done nothing to heal their pain. What might be a more restorative approach to justice look like for people convicted of both first and second degree murder to balance the need for healing with the balance for mercy?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the tragedy is above and beyond the loss of their family member is that they are often frozen in time because there is no interaction between inmates and the victims. They are literally barred from contacting them. So I can almost guarantee you there was an inmate, James Strapple, that was a million light years away from the person he was when he committed that crime. And I can't imagine a family at least not feeling profoundly better after getting the opportunity to see that. And I wish they could have that, because right now they don't have that opportunity. When the inmates write to the forgiveness bank, there's no obligation or duty to receive that level. There's no channel of communication where an inmate can interact with the victim's family, primarily for the victim's family's healing and betterment. And their anguish is raw, but we also have to be careful that we can't allow, like clemency has a role, and we can certainly and need to incorporate victim feedback, but we also can't be in a position where the simple opposition of a family member would be the lone deciding facet that would keep an individual in prison. So I think it's important to balance that, but we need to have more opportunity for these inmates that have been in jail for 25, 30, 35, 40 years to interact with family victims, at least from a dialogue, whether it's letters, whether it's a video call like this, and they can understand what happened that night. And they can understand that these are not the people that, that this isn't the person that upended my life and took my family, that victim from my family.
Lieutenant Governor, would you tell us about what the forgiveness bank is?
Sure. It's a mechanism run through the Office of the Victim Advocate where inmates can write a letter to the victim's family, and they cannot contact the victim's family directly. They are prohibited from that. And of course, as it should be, the victims are no duty or obligation to receive the letter or read the letter, but it's often ignored or overlooked, or they're not aware that there was a letter. And I really fundamentally believe James Strapple's case would have gone differently, and the victim's family would feel a lot different if they could see the individual that he is, and the circumstances that brought them all together tragically that one night. He is not the individual that participated in that crime, and whether or not they think he should get out of prison or not, I guarantee you they would have a lot more healing and be in a lot better place, I think, emotionally, after all these years. That's compounding, that's stacking tragedy on top of tragedy, as far as I'm concerned.
Dr. Johnson, Mr. Brown, anyone else want to weigh in on the question? We have a whole lot of questions coming in here, so I'm happy to move on as well.
Well, personally, I just think Lieutenant Governor Fetterman did a wonderful job of giving that answer. I know that for my victim family, when I went through trial, I was a kid, and it was difficult to express those feelings, even when I was given an opportunity at the end of the trial to say something to the family. I didn't know what to say. But when I went through resentencing, and the family, the victim family did not show up, but they sent a letter in. But I also prepared a statement and stuff specifically for them, that the court extended to them, and I don't know the results of it and everything, but it felt like a real weight was off my shoulders. Like the healing, I know for me felt better to be able to tell them how I really felt about what happened that tragic night. And like the Lieutenant Governor was saying, you know, so I went to several resentencing hearings for juvenile lifers once I was out. And I've seen some of the families of those loved ones who was lost. And they felt so much better just hearing these people just giving their raw emotions and showing true remorse, you know. And I don't, like I say, it's never going to erase the pain and the heartache and all that they still will always suffer with anniversaries or whatever of it, not having that loved one there. But it does give some kind of understanding of the whole situation. So I just think that, you know, like the forgiveness bank and all that there, you know, so often I know plenty of people who have written to there, and like I said, we never knew how far the letters expanded. And we don't have no other way of reaching out to show them, you know, the individual that we are. That little boy or that little girl who were involved in a crime that happened 40, 50 years ago is not the person that the man or woman that's sitting in front of you today that's asking for this second chance.
Very, very powerful. We're almost out of time. So many of the questions coming in are about the pace and about the backlog. And so there we have 10 or 12 questions about this. Here's one from Elaine Salon. Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing your name. It's been reported there are about 150 applications in the pardons queue for processing and up to 1,000 applications waiting for review from the Department of Corrections. First, is this valid information? And if so, what needs to be done to clear the path and speed up the process? We are down to about the last 4 minutes, so be aware of time.
What absolutely needs to happen is that we need a legislative fix and solution. First and foremost, we should abolish right out of the gate, and I think that the political will is there, abolish LWOP for second-degree murder. It's ridiculous. And it's life without parole for second-degree murder. It's absurd. And it's needlessly punitive. That right there would, if we granted automatic parole review for, you're talking almost 1,150 people right out of the gate. And most of these individuals are very, very deserving of a second chance, particularly since they never took a life. And then continue a systematic review. Politically speaking, life without parole for first-degree murder is going to be a difficult lift. But what we can do is expand clemency and do it in ways where we have the understanding that we are hamstrung by the 5-0 vote, and we're hamstrung by the divergent opinions that have to come together to create a unified vote just to get it to the governor's desk. Those are longer term fixes in terms of the Constitution. But if we had the will to say, look, let's fix this legislatively, let's fix this, I think we're there. And if we're able to flip the legislature, and I'm not trying to make this partisan, but let's be honest, if we get some Democratic control in the House and or even the Senate, we can make these legislative fixes, and we can put the wrong things right. And we can also do it in a way that makes Pennsylvania more safe, fair, just, and more healing for the victim's family, because I saw that again and again. And I'll just close out with this. The Evans brothers victim has been in anguish for the last 20 years, begging to have them out. She begged. She's like, the only way we can heal is to let these men out. They were 18-year-old boys when this tragedy happened. They shouldn't have done what they did, but they were compassionate to my father. They dropped him off at the payphone. They let him take his medication. They should not die in prison. But our system had them locked and loaded to die in prison, and we had to break them free. And we need to do that on a legislative side. And I'm committed in my professional career in public service to helping facilitate that.
Celeste, I think it's back to you. I think we're out of time. Can I just say one quick thing? Just really quickly, I'd feel terrible if I didn't say this. There are two people who are before the board who are very close to Eastern State Penitentiary, Felix Rosado and Joseph Spinks. We have promised both of them jobs when they come home. And I just want to publicly thank you, Lieutenant Governor, for your support for both of those friends of ours.
They both were deserving men, and my heart breaks for them. It's terrible. And again, we age out of crime. Look at the recidivism rate for juvenile lifers. It's heartbreaking and it's maddening. And I'll never give up. And whatever, my path and trajectory will follow theirs, especially like the Horton brothers. We can't, this can't endure.
Well, thank you all so much. Really, thank you so much, panelists. Thank you to the wonderful team at Eastern State Penitentiary for helping us put this together. Again, if you want to get involved in the work FAMM is doing on Second Chances, please text chances to 21333. We look forward to having you join us. And thank you all so much. Have a good night.